Any fisherman will tell you no two trips out on the open sea are ever alike. The deep, murky water still hides plenty of secrets, and you never really know what might end up tangled in your nets. Strange objects, odd creatures, anything can show up. Add to that the ocean's unpredictable nature. One moment it's calm like a quiet night back home. The next it's wild and dangerous, as if the whole sea's turned against you. That's why most fishermen feel a bit of relief once they're finally heading back to shore after a few tough days out. But for this crew, just as they were making their way home, something unexpected in the water changed everything, and without hesitation, they jumped into action. The crew aboard the Golden Delight knows this all too well. What they came across might just be the most unforgettable part of their entire trip. But before we dive into what they found, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you don't miss more stories like this one. They'd been out at sea for almost 2 weeks now, much longer than usual. The first few days were slow with barely any catch, and heading back with empty nets just wasn't an option. They didn't have the luxury of sitting out a bad week. Fishing is tough and dangerous, and sadly, the pay doesn't always reflect that. What makes things worse is how overfishing has made good hauls harder to come by. These days, pulling in valuable fish is more of a gamble than ever. So they decided to change course and push further out, aiming for waters where fewer boats usually go. It took time, but their bet paid off. They eventually reached a wide stretch of open sea with no other fishing vessels in sight, no competition. As soon as they dropped their nets in, something felt different. When they started hauling them back, the weight alone told them they might have hit the jackpot. It was harder to pull in than anything they dealt with in nearly a year. With a lot of sweat and teamwork, they finally got the net on board and stood stunned as a wriggling mountain of fish spilled across the deck. That first net came up full, really full. It turned out to be the biggest catch they'd ever made on a single trip. Within just 2 days of fishing in that spot, the storage hold was packed tight. There wasn't even room left for one more bucket. The whole crew was thrilled. Every time they pulled in a new load, they were cheering like it was the first time. Everything just seemed to be going their way. On top of the massive haul, they spotted some incredible animals out in the open sea. But the whales that cruised up right next to their boat were by far the most unforgettable. Once every bit of space on the ship was crammed with fish, they knew it was time to head home. They couldn't wait around too long. If the fish started to spoil, all their hard work would have been for nothing. But on the way back, they ran into trouble. The water turned rough, far worse than they were used to. Navigating through it would have been far too risky, so the captain decided they needed to make a detour. That meant heading back the way they came, far enough to avoid being caught in the worst of it. Once they reached a safer distance, they'd try to circle around the storm. It wasn't a perfect plan. It would cost them at least 2 more days, but it gave them a better shot at staying safe. The storm was moving faster than their boat, but if they timed it right, they'd avoid the worst parts. Thankfully, the captain's plan worked, but by then the crew was worn out. After being at sea this long and with their food and fresh water running dangerously low, everyone was hanging on by a thread. Still, they knew they had a few more days to push through before they'd see land again. The good news was, being a fishing boat, they had no shortage of fish to eat. And by catching rainwater from the storm, they had just enough to keep from getting too dehydrated. They tried to stay busy, playing cards, rolling dice, or just staring out over the endless ocean. Every now and then, if they were lucky, a bit of sea life would break the surface. But most of the time it was just waves and sky. By now they were tired, cranky, and couldn't stand the smell of fish anymore. Thankfully, according to the captain, they were only about a day from shore now. No land in sight just yet, but earlier they had spotted a few boats off in the distance. For a moment, they thought about heading toward them to ask for extra water, but that would only slow them down, and really there was no way to know if those boats even had water to spare, or if the crews would be willing to share it with strangers. So they agreed to stay the course, focused on getting home as fast as they could, not wanting anything else to delay them. Then, all at once, something incredible came into view. Just above the horizon, a thin line of land appeared, clear and unmistakable. The crew exploded with joy. After everything they'd been through, it felt like a miracle. They were shouting, laughing, and clapping each other on the back like they'd just won the lottery. But while the rest of the crew was celebrating, one of the men stayed quiet, his eyes locked on the shore ahead. He couldn't look away. He was almost home. Then something caught his attention. Movement in the water just off to the side. He blinked a few times to focus. A dolphin had surfaced, swimming close to the boat. It was fully grown and looked beautiful. At first, it didn't seem unusual. They'd seen quite a few dolphins during their trip. Nothing out of the ordinary. These graceful animals were common in the areas where they usually fished. The crew always made an effort to avoid catching them in their nets. A couple had ended up tangled before, but they were lucky enough to free them each time, and the dolphin swam off without much harm. But something about this one was different. It wasn't moving like the others. It struggled to swim straight, and it didn't try to dive back down. The crewman watched closely, his brow furrowing. Then he saw it. Its tail was wrapped tightly in a thick, heavy fishing net. It had probably been discarded by another boat, or maybe even lost by them. Over time, they'd lost gear too, nets, ropes, claimed by the unpredictable ocean. The poor dolphin looked completely worn out, dragging the heavy mess behind it. There was no sign of its pod anywhere. It must have been stuck for a while, long enough to fall behind and end up all alone. Once the crewman realized what he was seeing, he didn't waste a second. He called out to the others right away. At first, it took them a moment to snap out of their excitement. They were still cheering over the sight of land, completely caught up in the moment. But once they followed his gaze and spotted the dolphin, it was already slipping past the boat. This could have been their one chance to help, if it had been any closer, but it was still too far and moving in the opposite direction. Now, fully aware of the situation, the whole crew stood still for a moment. They had a choice to make. Should they turn the boat around and try to help the dolphin, knowing it would delay their return even longer? Or keep heading for shore and leave the animal behind? The answer came without hesitation. Every single one of them agreed they were going after the dolphin. Some people might assume that because fishermen make a living off the ocean, they don't care much about the animals in it. But that couldn't be further from the truth. These men respect the sea deeply. Their lives depend on it. It's a relationship not unlike a farmer with his animals. He may raise them for food, but that doesn't mean he doesn't care for them. Without wasting time, the captain spun the boat around and set course after the struggling dolphin. From a distance, they could see it trying to dive under several times, only to pop back up almost instantly. Its trapped tail clearly made diving impossible. It wasn't long before the boat caught up. At first, the dolphin tried to veer away, changing directions in short bursts. But after a few attempts, it stopped resisting and just stayed near the boat. No one knew for sure whether it was too tired to fight or somehow understood that help had arrived. The crew didn't have a proper setup to lift a dolphin safely on board, so they made a quick decision to use the very thing that had caused the problem in the first place. They tossed out their fishing net, hoping to guide the dolphin in. To their surprise, it worked on the first try. Gently, they hauled the animal onto the deck. It didn't struggle much, just laid there, clearly exhausted. As soon as it was on board, the crew freed it from their own net, then carefully turned their attention to the old, tangled mess still wrapped tightly around its tail. It only takes two of the stronger crew members to gently hold the dolphin steady while the deck leader pulls out his knife and starts cutting away the tangled net. He works carefully, and after slicing through just a few thick strands, the rest of the mess loosens and slides right off. The crew quickly checks the dolphin over, looking for any injuries from being trapped, but thankfully it seems to be in good shape. You could already see it starting to perk up, moving a little more freely now that its tail was no longer weighed down. Wasting no time, the crew opens the ledge on the side of the deck. With a bit of careful pushing and lifting, they manage to slide the dolphin back into the water. The moment it hits the sea, it dives deep out of sight. The men stand there for a second, quiet but proud. They close the ledge and begin cleaning up the deck while the captain turns the boat back toward land. The rescue had probably added 5 or 6 extra hours to their trip, but not a single person on board regretted it. As they made their way home, the whole crew got a surprise. A dolphin suddenly leapt from the water right beside the boat. They were almost sure it was the same one they had just saved. And honestly, with how smart dolphins are, it wouldn't be hard to believe this was its way of saying thank you. By the time they reached shore, they were exhausted, but proud. They didn't just return with a full haul of fish and a solid paycheck ahead of them. They came back with a story none of them would ever forget, one they'd be telling for years. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you never miss another real-life adventure from the open sea.